facilitated reviewing the items, making sure that we have all the right concepts. And we've had a translatability review. Paul and Dan, that was Helena Corriere from Northwestern, did an excellent job reviewing it. We've made some deletions as a result of that. And we are now with, Dan, how many items do we have? Somewhere in the range, like 150, 160, yeah, in that range, sleep item pool. So let me go through these slides, and then we're going to show you the document. And I think we can end, depending on discussion, with about a 15-minute presentation, questions, and then we'll wrap up and send out the documents a little bit later today for your review and comment. So that's a kind of a one-week assignment. Next slide. Partner review sleep health concepts today. Okay, so just to remind everybody, we're using a set of promise methods to generate child self-report and parent proxy report of measures of sleep health. And the child self-report measures are ages 8 to 17, and the parent report actually extend the age range to 5 to 7. If we had more money, we would love to extend the sleep health assessments down to younger ages. I think that's an entirely different project, and hopefully in the future we'll be able to extend this down to younger ages, probably requiring new approaches for assessment as well as new item level concepts. Next slide. So what do we mean by a concept map? This is an idea that our pediatric promise group has developed, where we start with the overarching concept that we're interested in, and here it's sleep health. We call that our domain of interest, and then from that domain we use a variety of methods, expert input. We've talked to a number of sleep health experts, literature review, both the theory of sleep as well as existing sleep health measures, and then discussions with semi-structured interviews with parents and children to identify the sort of total number of sleep health concepts, and then we organize those into a hierarchy. So we have this 150 set item concepts, and we organize them into groups that make sense. We call them facets, and then those facets get grouped into subdomains. So thinking about it sort of the other way, if you start at the high level, sleep health is our domain of interest. That's the kind of universal health attribute that we're interested in evaluating. We define a domain. It's not exactly plain English, but this is the best we can do for now, and maybe we can translate the domain definition into plain English someday. We define it as a clinically coherent health attribute that is universal. That is, it's universally relevant to the human condition, regardless of disease status. The idea here is that we're not out to develop a measure of cancer-specific sleep health or asthma-specific sleep health. We believe sleep health is a set of experiences that we all are exposed to over the course of the day and our lives. After an extensive amount of work, which I won't summarize today, but it's in the grant and we've also covered some of this material, we settled on 3 subdomains. And in point of fact, this is really largely based on 2 things. One, the work that was done by Paul and Dan's group at Pittsburgh in developing the adult measures, a subdomain of sleep quality, and then a subdomain of wakefulness. The language there is a little bit different for the adult measures. We'll probably have to come back and adjudicate the language. We've sort of stated these in the positive. You want to have sleep quality, you want to have good quality, you want to be wakeful. In the adult measures, they're phrased more on the negative side as sleep-related impairment, for example, for wakefulness. We heard loud and clear from our parents that if we're going to measure sleep health, we have to measure the behaviors and the environmental contexts that comprise sleep practices. And so that 3rd subdomain we actually added after we did our parent interviews. So So the concept map starts with sleep health, and then from that we think there are three subdomains or three measurable components of sleep health: sleep quality, wakefulness, and sleep practice. So ultimately we want to be able to assign a number to how good your sleep quality is, with a number of 50 being average, and then higher means better sleep quality, lower means poor sleep quality. The same for wakefulness. We want to be able to create an instrument that provides a number for how wakeful you feel. And then the sleep practices is a little bit less clear whether there's going to be a single number or whether we'll end up with a set of items that with each item providing important information. So the sleep practices may need a different kind of scoring approach that we're not going to address today, but just downstream, bear in mind that we recognize that that may not be a single coherent health attribute. There may be multiple aspects of sleep practices that fall out in the measurement process. Next. So we are going to be asking you to comment on our definitions. We want to make sure that we've got the right language. We started with the adult definitions. We want to make sure that after we end up with whatever definitions for sleep quality and wakefulness we arrive at, that they are fully harmonized with the adult versions of the sleep item banks. And then we have a definition for sleep practices. Next slide. And by the way, this is just the slide advertisement. This has all been packaged up in a nice little Word document that we're going to be sending out after we proof it this afternoon. And it has all the definitions, all the item level concepts, so that you could edit to your heart's content. But let me just now take you to the next level. We started to just remind you at sleep health at domain level, and then below that these subdomains. And then we have these things we call facets, which are just convenient groupings of items. They're not meant to be scales themselves, although we may find as we go through the quantitative work that some of these could potentially fall out as scales, but we believe, at least at this point in the process, that they are going to be so highly correlated that they fit within an overall scale of either sleep quality or wakefulness. And you can see under sleep practices, the facets, they may not correlate with one another, and they may actually stand alone because, again, their behaviors and environmental contexts that may not scale. They might, but they may also be indices and indicator items as well. Okay, next slide. So we want your input on the concept map going from domain to subdomain, and you'll also see the item concepts within the facets. We're going to show you a little bit about, we're going to show you what that looks like. And then just to review and comment on the document, this is so important to us because this is the final step before we start testing. We want to have all of our partners review each of our items and the definitions to ensure that we've got it right before we launch ourselves into a sort of rapid-paced field test, both cognitive interviews as well as quantitative. We're hoping that you can do this in a week. And all we're asking for is that you take this Word document and mark it up by hand, and then scan it scan it and send it back to Dana, or you can just send a track changes version back to Dana. Dana, can we now go to the Word document so I can just show people? I'm going to just show you the Word document and open it up for questions and comments. You are on a secure device right now. I don't know. People may not be able to see anything. Dana is changing applications. Why don't you know? There we go. Okay, maybe you can make that a little bit bigger. So, so here we have the first page is sleep health.
The first page is going to be sleep health.
Yeah. So okay. So this is that you'll start with the definition. So there's the sleep health definition. Here are the three subdomain definitions, and we want your review and comment on those definitions. You can either just use track changes, or you can write your comments in the boxes. Okay, now going on to the next page. And so here are now we're in the sleep quality domain, And Dana, I think what we're going to want to do is color code things to make it easy. So we're showing you the domain is sleep health, the subdomain is sleep quality, and then the facet is sleep depth, not the concept, but the facet is sleep depth. And then we just show you the various items. We're not providing the what's sometimes called the item context, which usually includes the recall period, such as in the past 7 days. And we're not showing you the response categories, things like I slept lightly, never, always. Those are response categories. We're not showing you that. We're just showing you the specific concepts. And what we want your comments on, stay down a little bit, is omissions and commissions. So have we omitted any item concepts that should be part of sleep depth? Two, are any of the items that we've assigned to sleep depth not appropriately assigned? So then just go to another one. We're repeating we have the definitions of the facets there. Here are the sleep onset items, and then it just repeats itself. So it's a pretty self-explanatory document. I think that's it for the presentation. We have to proof it just a bit this afternoon. We want to get it out to you and get some comments back in the next week, and then put a bow around these what we call item pools, these groups of items, so that we can go out and test whether or not children and their parents understand what we think the items represent. Any questions on the assignment? Any points of clarification that Lisa in particular would like to make?
I think you covered it.
Anna? Dana?
Somebody might be muted because it looks like someone's trying to talk, but we're not hearing anything.
If anybody has a question, you might want to unmute.
It looks pretty straightforward, Chris. We can anticipate about 150 items, you said?
That's what I think, Paul. We think we're going to drop some after cognitive interviewing, and but actually, we're getting better at writing the items. And then after Helena Carreri does her translatability review, she's so good. It really helps. So we modified a number of items based on her critical read of the clarity of the concepts as well as their cultural relevance.
Yeah, just a couple of initial impressions if we have time to share those. You foreshadowed this, but I suppose we should, well, the quantitative data will lead us, but sleep practices may not be quite as bankable, scalable as the other two families of items. That would be an initial prediction I might make.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Some of those items are going to be more like pain quality than they are like dimensional, measures of severity having to do with sleep quality disturbance or quality of wakefulness. So.
It may be that we form a couple of indices, and there may be some sleep practice items that are so important that perhaps what we end up with is a sleep practice profile that it's been tested for understandability, and maybe we do some preliminary evaluation of them.
Right.
But I think that's what I would hypothesize as well.
Something to anticipate there. The other thing that caught my eye under sleep quality was the parasomnias and specific symptoms of sleep disorders, because we ended up eliminating those items. They tend not to be as well behaved psychometrically either when the goal is to develop a single rule or thermometer with regard to sleep quality or sleep disturbance.
I would echo that. It's hard to do everything as we learned, and so some of the things that you currently have listed in sleep quality are useful items, but because they get at disorders that tend to be present or not present, it is again harder to scale those on a frequency or severity basis.
Dan and Paul, do you think there's any utility in, I mean, I know that was the experience, let me back up. I know that was the experience with the adult work.
Yeah.
We included them for comprehensiveness and also just to test that same hypothesis, sort of expecting that they might fall out. On the other hand, if they undergo cognitive interviewing and we show that they're understandable, that they're kind of the right items to be asking, it might be useful to just pull them out as a little profile of parasomnia, not necessarily a scale, but you know, items that have content validity that might be useful from a clinical perspective.
The other thing, and I understand that, the other thing I think that we encountered in that is the case, we're kind of picking on parasomnias in particular here, but the frequency is not well aligned with a 7-day reporting frame.
Right.
So some of these things, like enuresis, could happen on an almost nightly basis, but sleepwalking is frequently something that happens less frequently than once a week. So, yeah.
All right, the base rates are low. I suppose, Chris, maybe it looks different with kids. Maybe parasomnias, to the extent that they occur, are markers of severity in some way that, they tend not to be so much with older people, where they tend to function more like categories or disorders.
Yeah, right. That very well may be. Lisa, do you have any thoughts on this issue?
Yeah, I think, parasomnias are much more common in children, and, it's something that kids typically outgrow, or it changes in presentation. And we often see it as a presentation for poor quality or deficient sleep, because that's what triggers the parasomnia. So I think along the lines of what you're saying, that it may be indicative of other related issues. But I also agree that in the past 7 days, we may not capture it, but I've noticed some of the other measures have asked, say, in the past month. And I think, perhaps this would require a modified time frame for something like that. I think sleep-disordered breathing or enuresis, again, those would be present nightly, so that might be slightly different. But some of the other general parasomnias, the non-REM parasomnias, I think we would probably see less frequently, but could be still something important.
And these, I mean, now that you have the items up there, these are in some ways less flagrant than, the syndromal adult parasomnias. So
right, children don't have that REM behavior disorder that you often think of. So, but 40% of kids have some type of sleepwalking, sleep terror event at some point in their life. And I mean, on a regular basis, it's more common than you would expect, especially for kids who don't sleep enough or stay up too late or something else is going on.
Well, we'll see. Again, you guys are in the fortunate position of not having to cull 500 items here. So, with 3 or 4 or 5 parasomnia items may not be so critical.
And we've gone back and forth because I was just going to say, because again, these are also the issue with these are parent-reported items. So the same with the sleep-disordered breathing, and we've gone back and forth about the importance of including or excluding. But since we do have the ability and we do have the room within our numbers thing, we thought it's still worth going ahead and looking at to see if they fall out. They fall out, but if there's something to be captured, the pediatric sleep community would love to have measures like this. And I think the same goes for the sleep practices. Of course, it's not going to be a normative type of measure, but we don't have great measures that can be used across development that capture some of these issues. And sleep practices are so essential for pediatric sleep health. I mean, in adults as well, but there's so many of these things on a day-to-day basis that could clearly be addressed to improve sleep health, that if we can identify, again, it's sort of, we have that luxury or the ability to look at them now, and if we're unsuccessful at capturing them, then so be it. But, if we don't try, we'll never know.
Yeah. Well, and everything doesn't need to be a scalable IRT calibrated item bank. As Chris, I think, was suggesting, you can have other sets of items that are valuable clinically.
Sure.
The other thing I'm reminded of, again, in our adult work are the clock time measures of sleep, which don't scale very well. But, people want to know what bedtimes are and self-reported estimates of length of sleep and stuff like that. So.
we've got that in there as well. You'll see that pops up. All right. Well, I think this is very good preliminary discussion.
Wait, Chris?
I'm gonna. Barbara, do you want to say anything?
No, this is Amy. I have a quick question for you, and I apologize for I was running from another meeting, so you may have already covered this. But is this going to also be all of the parent stakeholders are going to see this as well?
Yeah, everybody.
So just, you know, is there a way to better define the parasomnias? And there's certain terms in here that I'm confused on. So like bruxism, am I getting it right?
Yeah. Yes. We can. Well, we're gonna proofread this afternoon.
Okay. Okay.
The blue, like parasomnia, in these pages are what we call facets, and the definition is actually not that important, but it's a more of a descriptive phrase. So we can use plain English here, and so let's go back through it. Dana, if you don't understand any word, then certainly Amy won't either. So
Okay. Thanks.
we will do that, and Amy, if you think that after you see this, maybe we could just send Amy an advance. Would you be willing to look at an advance copy this afternoon?
Yeah, absolutely.
To make sure that you think the instructions are clear?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Okay. All right. We'll do that. Okay. Well, this is so important. I wanted to just go over this in during the telephone call. But I think we have a really good set of items. We'll look forward to your feedback. And we'll summarize it probably 2 weeks from now, and we're looking forward to the cognitive interview soon thereafter. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for your time. Have a terrific day.
Thanks, Chris.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye.